Well, hey, welcome to another episode of the Pastors Roundtable. I'm here with my friend Mel Masengale, and I'm excited to talk to you guys a little bit about some stuff going on in Pennsylvania and what's going on in Mel's ministry and share. So, Mel and I, we've gone back. Oh man, almost 6-7 years ago, maybe. We were on staff together at a church, and then he transitioned out and went to a lead pastor role in Pennsylvania, a church that needed a lot of just new vision, new heart, new passion. And Mel came in, brought that, and they have been seeing lots of growth, tremendous growth over the last couple of years. He's also helping lead a network called the Back 40 Network, which is helping churches in kind of rural areas of America with resources. They've got a podcast. They've got a conference. The conference, man, just happened a few weeks ago. From what I could see, what I heard was just awesome. You guys have had some great speakers out. Even Carey Nieuwhof was there, I think, last year, the year before that. And so Mel has been a great leader. He's been in all kinds of different levels of leadership and different roles, positions, which we'll dive into here in a minute. But I'm excited for us to hear from Mel today. So Mel, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan. It's an honor to be on here with you and have a conversation. I'm so glad that you would think of having me. You must have run out of guests, so you got me.
I did. We ran out of the guests, but now I was making fun of you before we started about the beard. So I gotta let you guys know, for those guys that can't see Mel has, well, at least used to have, just the beard that of all beards. I mean, you can just think of Google. Like woodman, just out backwoods, man. And that beard used to be on Mel, but it's all trimmed up, man. What's going on?
It's better kept now than it was last. I was in Oklahoma City back in, I don't remember, June, July. I don't remember when it was now. A friend of mine said, "Hey, you need to go get your beard trimmed at this place." And I don't even remember the name of it now, but I went in and they actually shaped it like it should look and, trimmed it nicely. And so I've tried to keep it looking a little nicer since then, instead of just like a Grizzly Adams mountain man. So, I mean,
I was going to say, like, your beard almost needs like its own beard podcast of how to be a beard,
It'd probably be way more interesting than my Back 40 podcast, but yeah.
I'm sure it would not, but I appreciate the trimmed up beard. I'm sure your wife does too. So,
and I actually did it just for you. So,
oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Do your girls appreciate the trimmed up beard?
They don't really care. I asked them not too long ago if they wanted me to shave, and I've had the beard like 4.5, 5 years now. And they both were like, no, you cannot shave your beard. And my wife remembers what's underneath my beard, so she doesn't want me to shave it either.
And just to clarify, we're talking about your daughters. So the daughters are vocal about it. So, well, Mel, just tell us a little bit. I mean, you're a lead pastor. You're also helping out with the Back 40 Network. So tell us just a little bit about the Back 40 Network. What is it? What are you guys doing?
Sure.
Where can people get connected with you?
Yeah. So we came on staff at Summit back in January of 2014. We came to the area. The church was about 500 at the time, and we immediately saw the need in our region for there's so many churches, but so many of them were small, rural, struggling churches. And so we just felt like, what do we need to do to help? And when we looked at demographic studies, we saw that there were 90,000 people in our county. There were 47,000 people of those that said they don't go to church anywhere. And so we just felt like, man, what are we supposed to do about that? And our answer was, hey, how do we help other churches get healthy? And how do we help other churches begin to grow and reach lost people? 'Cause we felt like if our church grows, that's great, but it might be a kingdom loss ultimately. So for us, we just decided, hey, what if we helped a church of 100 become a church of 200? Or what if we helped a church of 50 become a church of 100? If we would all just do our part, we felt like we could reach the 47,000. And so that's kind of what our goal had been originally. And now we're starting to influence some other churches in other regions, other parts of the United States. And so that's fun. It's fun to see. It's fun to be able to help and partner with churches. And so that's how Back 40 got started a few years ago. So we had our first conference in 2017. Carrie Newhoff, Shannon Odell were here. 2018, we had Donnie Griggs, who wrote a great book called Small Town Jesus, and Peter Haas was with us as well. And then this year in 2019, we had Gerald Brooks and Matt Fry, and they both did a great job. And all those sessions are available on our website at back40.network. If somebody's interested in watching that or following along, they certainly can. So we started the network, we started the podcast, all that kind of stuff, just basically as a resource, just to help churches, help pastors, and so it's been fun to come alongside pastors.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, they can get on that on your website, which is Back 40 Network. Is that what it was?
Yeah, back40.network, and they can connect with us on social media as well, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and follow along with some of the stuff. We have some roundtables, locally from time to time, and we're starting to look at. We've had some invitations to go to different parts of the United States to do local Back 40, and we're not there yet, but that's something we're looking at down the road. So
that's great. That's great. So it sounds like your dog wants to be on the podcast as well. You want to introduce your dog?
She's the manliest dog ever. This is Lulu. She's demon possessed and black eyes, lifeless eyes. Anyway.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Mel, tell us just a little bit. Like I said, you've had a few different roles in the church. Just tell us a little bit about your ministry journey. What roles have you played? What does that your ministry journey look like?
Yeah, I came out of Bible college, and I felt like if I'm going to do ministry, you got to do youth ministry. That's what you're supposed to do, right? And so I did youth ministry, and I loved it, and I felt like we had a level of success in youth ministry. But at the end of the day, we had done youth ministry about 8 or 9 years, and we realized, hey, you know what? Maybe our heart's shifting a little bit, and so we started doing adult ministry at that point, doing associate pastor. I was a community pastor at a church, just doing outreach stuff, and just basically whatever we needed. And so I did that at a couple places, and came on staff at Victory in Oklahoma City, where we were on staff together, and I was a campus pastor at our main location there, and did that for a couple of years. And I felt like at that point I felt prepped to be able to go just about anywhere and have some modicum of success, just because I had lots of responsibility there. So I went from there to becoming the lead pastor here at Summit, and I had no idea how challenging the role of lead pastor really was. I thought I did, and then when I got into that role, it's a heavy burden, and I understood that, and I gave a lot more grace to some of the pastors I served under after I realized some of the challenges of being a lead pastor. And I've served in lots of different roles, lots of different areas, had lots of staff responsibilities and people answering to me and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, so it's been.
Yeah, share about that, because I'm sure you're not the only person that has transitioned into lead pastoring and just felt like, whoa, that was a lot different. I thought I was prepared, but maybe I'm not. So just what was that like for you? What were some of that learnings? What is that?
Well, I think one of the biggest things for me, when I was at Victory as a campus pastor, I've told people the most challenging thing I've ever done in ministry is to try to learn how to steward someone else's vision. And that's what I had to do as a campus pastor. So if pastor said, here's what we're doing, no matter how crazy the idea might be, if I would have to sell it as if it was the greatest thing ever. And so learning how to steward that vision and lay down my vision was really challenging, but it helped me make the transition to be a lead pastor better. And so that was one of the things I think I learned in that process. But you're not ready for the weight. You're not ready for the weight that comes with every decision. Because again, when you're a campus pastor or an associate pastor, an exec pastor, at the end of the day, the pastor is still responsible. So you can make a decision. You still have this warm blanket of, well, I'm not the boss though, so he has to decide. And when you're the pastor, it's like, oh no, I got to decide. Like, this is my baby, and so it's just different. When you got debt to deal with, and you got challenges in the church, and people that are upset with you, or they don't like you, or they're mad about something. All those things, again, it's deeply personal and intimate, and it's hard to deal with some of that stuff when you're the lead guy.
Yeah, I know a couple of my friends have talked about just that. When you're an associate pastor, even like youth or kids, campus, whatever it might be, you are worried about your ministry and what you're doing. But now as the lead pastor, right, like you not only worry about yours, but you're also like, man, I got to take care of my staff.
Yep.
I got to make sure that they're fed, that their kids are fed. And so you're worried about not just the church's finances, but also just like you're paying your staff and take care of them. And so I'm sure that weighs heavily on you as well.
Well, and helping staff see the big picture, because I want every one of my staff members to believe their department is the most important. I want my youth pastor to think the youth ministry is the most important ministry of the church, but I also need them to be mature enough to have a little bit of the big picture and understand, but my ministry is not the only ministry in this church. And so helping the staff balance that and understand that, and helping them see as much of the picture as I can, is helpful, but it's also challenging, because I remember when I was a youth pastor and thought, I don't know why they're struggling. My ministry's growing. I'm doing great, and it was just, I was so singularly focused on what I was doing that I failed to see what else was going on in the church and how my actions impacted other departments and other leaders and other people. And so that's helped me have just a different approach, I think, when it comes to, leading the staff, leading the team, is just having some of the background I've had. So that's been helpful.
Yeah. So talk about, what are you doing to, I know one of the big words is silos, right? Like that, we don't want our ministries to be siloed. So what are some things that you guys are doing there at Summit that are helping the different departments to not be so siloed?
We do a lot of leadership development together. And so I really think proximity helps breed community. And so the more time our team members are spending together, the more likely it is that they're working together on stuff. And so, we do a lot of leadership development together in the same room. Even our team meetings, like we don't have a weekly staff meeting, but I'll do weekly team meetings. So like youth, kids, young adults, they'll meet together for 15 or 20 minutes just to do a debrief together. So we'll talk about stuff. And so just even in the context of that short meeting, it really helps them stay aware of what's going on in the other areas that are most related to them. We do the same thing with our adult ministry team. We'll have a 15 or 20-minute meeting on Mondays. But again, it just keeps them all on the same page. There's overlap, because then they can talk about, oh, this is happening with me. This is how it might impact you. Or, hey, be thinking about, or, hey, this is happening with this person, so I wanted to make you aware of. And so that just helps communication. And so I think simple things like that help with it. It's crazy, but I really do believe the closer the offices are together, the easier it is to relate. So when we've got people officed all over our building, as happens with a growing church, it's harder for them. They have to work harder to stay in community, because if you're tucked away in an old broom closet on the backside of the building and you're not in the office suite, you've got to work to stay in those kind of relationships. And so we really do try to be intentional about building on the same page, talking through, laying out the sermon series for the year and all those kind of things. We do that stuff together. And so all that stuff I think helps to some degree, but that's the challenge of a growing church, is it's easy to get so focused on what I'm doing that we forget about the other stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. So you just said something that is pretty, I don't even know if you're allowed to say that. You said we don't have a weekly staff meeting. I don't know if that's like allowed to be said. So how is that happening?
Well, what we were doing when I first came, and the staff was smaller. So when I came, the church was about 500, and we had some part-time staff and a couple of full-time staff. And it was real easy to do a weekly staff meeting. And so we'd get together on Monday and, okay, let's talk about the weekend. Let's talk about, and we would go through the stuff. And the bigger our staff got, the more we started adding team members, the more I realized how ineffective that meeting was. Because what would happen is we would get sidetracked on a tech issue for 20 minutes, and I would have my whole admin team in that room, and you could just see their eyes glaze over. Like, this has nothing to do with us. It's still valuable, it's still important, but what I realized is I'm wasting all their time. They're less efficient because they're in this meeting rather than more efficient. So what we did is we just got rid of the weekly meetings, and I started doing, they're not truly stand-up meetings, but that's basically what they are. They're going to be so short we could stand up through this meeting, 15, 20 minutes tops, and let's just do the highlights. And in those weekly meetings with my teams, so it's students, adult ministry team, and then creative. Those three teams I'll meet with, and then I'll meet with my facility director as well for about a 10-minute meeting. Just, hey, tell me what's going on. But those meetings take me a little longer than the one meeting used to, but the individual team members, their time is used more efficiently. And so it allows us to dig in a little deeper. But really, what we're doing in those meetings, they're just giving me information. They're telling me, hey, Pastor, you need to know about, and hey, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I need your help with. Here's the thing I need an answer on. Can you help me with this? And so literally, we do that in 15 or 20 minutes. They're giving me information, and I'm giving them high level stuff, whatever they have to have. But I'm not casting vision in that. I'm not doing anything else. They're downloading information to me. And then once a month, we don't have a creative name for it. It's our big team meeting is what we call it, our big staff meeting. So the first Monday of every month, we do a large staff meeting with everybody. Some churches call them all staffs, but basically it's everybody who's employed at our church, part-time, full-time. They all meet here for about an hour and a half long meeting. And in that meeting, all we do is we'll do about 30 to 40 minutes of wins. Hey, what's going on that we want to celebrate? And that's when, man, people talk about, I'm so excited about this. Hey, we pulled this off. Hey, we began this. We started this. Hey, this person had a shift in their life, whatever it is. We'll share all those stories, and it's really exciting. It's a great thing. We'll take like 10 minutes. We'll do like handwritten cards to people in our church, because those are gold. The bigger our church gets, the more valuable those cards become to people. And then usually I'll do about a 30 or 40-minute teaching, and I'll talk about leadership stuff. I'll cast vision, I'll encourage, and that's all it is. And that's me transmitting information to them in that meeting. And then we do monthly, I'll bring somebody in to do leadership development, or I'll Skype somebody in. We'll do a couple times a year, we'll read through a book together. So we'll do that every other week with all of my pastors. We'll sit down and go through that. So, we have different times as well that we do some of that. But really, as far as just meetings, I hate meetings for the meeting's sake. So let's trim them down. Let's do what we need to do, but let's be as efficient as we possibly can. That was kind of our idea.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So you come into a church of 500, and I know you're real passionate about leadership development, leadership investment. So, I mean, there's so many churches that are, 500, 400, whatever, 800, that kind of say, man, where do I start with leadership development? How do I get these people involved? How do I get that my people in front of great leadership development people? So how have you, I mean, you've got Carey Nieuwhof to come out, you've got these speakers to come out. And so what are you doing? What advice would you give to somebody who's in that situation?
Well, and every church is a little different, but like just like pastors will tell people, if you show me your checkbook, I can tell you what you value. And if you show me your budget, I'll tell you what you value. And so if you've got zero budgeted for leadership development, you can say you value it all you want, you don't. And so what we did is we just made a line item in our budget, and we budgeted in, hey, what's it going to cost us to bring somebody in every month or every other month to just do a deposit into our staff? Somebody like Carey Nieuwhof, and this was before Carey is who he is now. This was 2014, I think, was the first time I brought Carey in, and he just came in and did staff development with our team. And it was because I asked him, I reached out and said, hey, would you? And he said, okay, yeah. And so I've had Carey in a few times, but just other high level leaders who I just asked. And that's one of the things is they're not chasing me down to say, hey, can we develop your team? But they're open if I'm willing to reach out to them. So, when we were a church of 500, I was reaching out to churches of 800 or 1,000 and saying, hey, come in and tell us what you're doing so we can rip it off. Like we want to be what you are someday. We want to be like you when we grow up. And so, where we're at now, in a normal weekend, we're around 1,400 on a weekend, and we're growing, and that's great. But again, I'm reaching out to pastors of 2,000, 4 or 10,000, and saying, hey, come in and tell us what you're doing, and we want to grow and be stretched. And so we budgeted it. We made time for it. I knew our staff would be busy, and honestly, every time we do something like that, I'll have a staff member say to me, man, Pastor, when this was on the schedule, I didn't feel like I had enough time, but man, I'm so glad that we did that. It's so helpful. And it's 100% true. So we made the time, we budgeted the money, and we just said, we're going to do it. And even if you're watching this or listening to this and you go, we don't have a budget for it, like we can't budget for it, our margins are too tight, I would say there's probably people in your community that are high level leaders that would come in for free to do development with you. So maybe not even a church leader, but maybe somebody who's a high level leader in their business or in their, the community. Maybe the head of the Chamber of Commerce is a high level leader, and they can come in and talk about business principles without giving you the nuts and bolts of church. So we just prioritized it, said, we're going to do this, we're going to make it happen. And that's what's developed.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great. I love the idea of bringing in somebody even from the outside that's in your community there. And so, I mean, you've had a lot of exposure to these guys. And so, what if you could maybe pull out one gold nugget? What would be one of the best advice that you've heard or that you've received, or maybe that you've given?
Oh gosh. Probably the best piece of advice I've received. Uh, One of my pastors growing up, I heard him say it 1,000 times when I was a kid, but it really makes a lot of sense to me now. And he said, he would say, Jesus was the Son of God and couldn't make 12 guys happy all the time. So you're never going to make everyone happy in your life. And especially now that I'm a pastor, I really understand that, because if you pastor 50 people, or if you got 50 kids in your youth ministry or whatever it is, there's zero chance that you're going to make all 50 of them happy. There's always going to be people unhappy with you. And our goal is not to make people happy. Our goal is to please God. And so, I've told our church before, when I stand before God someday, I'm going to be held in judgment for my life. I'm going to be held in judgment for the people that I led, that I stewarded as the pastor, and I'm going to be held in judgment before God, not before the people. So if I've only got to make one of them happy, it's going to be God every day of the week. And so that just makes it easier to go, hey, I'm going to live with some of this criticism that comes my way. And so that's been one that that's been good for me. One of the things I've told pastors a lot lately that I think has been really helpful for me, that I've learned, is that you can never let your role become your identity. And that was one of the things, the dangers I got into when I was at Victory, is that I was on the stage every weekend. It was a large church, large platform, and I was getting recognized in public a lot. And I realized that I really liked it, and I realized how dangerous it was for my soul. It was almost like when you're driving down the highway and you kind of drift over those rumble strips, and it kind of jars you awake. And I had this moment with the Holy Spirit where I realized I liked it, and I were just like rumble strips, like, whoa, this is not good for me. And so I had a conversation with my wife, and we talked about it, and we just decided at that moment, I'm never going to need a church worse than a church needs me. Because if I do, for my ego, because I'm the campus pastor, because I'm the pastor of this church, and that's my identity. If I ever need it for the salary, because I've seen lots of pastors who wouldn't leave a church because they were making too good of money, even though they probably have been there too long. They needed the church worse than the church needed them. And as a result, if we get in that place, we'll never be able to be obedient to God, because God will say, I've got something better for you. I've got something better for the church. And we'll never leave, because my identity and my ego are wrapped up in it, or my financial, future is wrapped up in it. And so we just decided at that point, you know what, we're never, ever, ever going to need a church worse than the church needs us. So that has freed us up when we came here to make some really, really unpopular decisions. And, my first weekend here, we had, they were averaging about 500. My first weekend here, we had 647. My second weekend here, we had 417. So I don't know if that tells you something about my preaching or what, but people in one weekend. And honestly, in the first 90 days I was here, we got so much criticism and so much hate mail and so much public and private. I mean, it was ugly. And we just kind of anchored ourselves in this thing where we said, hey, this is not who we are. This is the job we're doing. And I'm not here to make people happy. I'm here to please God. So if we lose people, we're going to do exactly what we feel like God's calling us to do. We're going to ride this thing into the ground if that's what we feel like God's asking us to do. And we're going to be okay with that. So those are, I guess, two pieces of advice, one that I've gotten and one that I've doled out some.
Yeah, it's good. Now, I think you feel comfortable sharing, but you've talked to me a little bit about, and you've shared before about how you received some of that hate mail, and then eventually some of those started turning around. So you want to share just one of those stories, or
Yeah,
a little bit about that?
honestly, I kept, after about the first 90 days here, we started seeing results. We started seeing people saved. Every service, literally, people were responding for salvation. Lives were being changed. And that's the ultimate trump card. It's hard to argue with that, because people might hate the music. They might not like the style. But if people are getting saved, at the end of the day, it's hard to argue with that. So we were seeing people saved pretty regularly. The church was beginning to grow, even though we lost a couple hundred people over that first 3 or 4 months. The church was starting to grow. Good things were happening. And so I kept all that hate mail, but what we did in the process is we just told our staff, because our staff was getting frustrated and they were saying, what should we do? Should we talk about it? Should we respond? And I would invite every one of those people to have a conversation with me, like, hey, let's talk. That's what Matthew 18 says. Like, come to my office, let's sit down, I'll meet you somewhere. And none of them, not a single family, ever would. And so I just made the decision, we're going to love them in spite of this. And so what happened is, I would be talking to somebody in the lobby, and I would see one of these people walking through out of the corner of my eye, and I'd say, excuse me 1 second. I'd turn and go, hey, it's great to see you today. I love you so much. I'm so glad you're here. And part of that was because it was a discipline, because I needed to make myself say I love you, because I didn't feel like loving them very much. But it was also a discipline for my heart to it kind of brought my heart into alignment to love them. And so we just made the decision to do that. And of all the hate mail that we got, I kept it all. And about 2 or 3 years ago now, probably, I went through it. I found it all and went through it. And of all the pieces of hate mail that we got, either handwritten, emails, Facebook messages, I printed it all. I saved it. Of all of that, only one family left our church. All the rest of the families stayed in our church, and most of them are some of our biggest supporters today. And I'm so grateful that we just decided, we chose the high road. We just said, hey, we're not going to trash them. We're going to love them, and if they stay, we're going to love them. If they leave, we're going to love them. And so, honestly, that's paid off. We sowed seed that we didn't know if we'd ever see the fruit from, and we're seeing the fruit of it today. And that was a really hard season. It wasn't easy at all, but I'm so grateful that we just chose the high road. And I've told people the high road sucks, but the good news is there's no traffic. So we just chose the high road and loved on people in spite of it, and that proved to them our character and who we were and what we were about.
Wow. I mean, that just sounds crazy to keep all these pieces of mail that just seem like they're attacking you, but you're a weird guy, man. So it works out.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were moments that were, I had 2 people leave the church on the same day. One person said, you're too legalistic, so we're leaving the church. And one said, you water down the gospel too much, so we're leaving the church. And it's like, wait a second, like you're saying opposite things, right? And so at the end of the day, you just decide, man, I can't make you people happy, so I'm just going to do what God's calling us to do and love you as well as I can, love God as well as I can, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, that's so funny. So you guys have experienced tons of change.
Yeah.
I mean, just in programming, staffing, buildings. I mean, you name it, you guys have experienced change. So what have you done that has worked? What have you learned about change? How did you lead through all that change? What advice can we give us when he talks to about change and helping lead through all that?
As a new leader, it was real easy for me to change things that I didn't start, because I didn't see the vision behind it. I didn't know the why behind it. And so, as I said earlier, I made some really unpopular decisions. We had a Saturday night service when I came, and it was about 80 people that would come on a Saturday night in like a 700 seat auditorium. And it was just a little depressing. It was like, backup. It was the people leading worship that would never lead worship on a Sundays. That's who they would have lead worship on a Saturday. They would have, they didn't have kids ministry on a Saturday night when I came. So we did it for about 3 months, and I just canceled it. I talked to the board and said, guys, we don't need it. And if we're not going to do it well, we're not going to do it, because it doesn't reflect well on us or the kingdom of God. And I'd hate making excuses for it. So if a family showed up on Saturday night, I'd have to say, please come back tomorrow to be better, because they don't have anything for their kids. So we canceled it, and man, that was part of some of our exodus. We had a bunch of people leave the church because they were saying things like, well, you're taking away our salvation, or, my husband will never go to heaven now because he'll never go to church. And it was just crazy stuff like that. And so we canceled the service, and we said, if we ever bring it back, we're going to do it well. And we're going to do it right. It'll look just like Sunday morning. And so eventually we did. About a year later, we brought it back because we needed to. But we made lots of decisions like that where we just said, nope, we're pulling the trigger on this. No, we're not going to do it. And we were just real decisive. And one of the things we did that I think we did well is we always led with vision. And so we never made a decision just because we don't want to do Saturday night anymore because we're tired of coming here on Saturday night. It was, hey, here's the vision behind us doing Saturday night. If we're going to do it, it's going to reflect well in the kingdom of God. And it's just not right now. So this is why we're not going to do it anymore. And so we did that with just about everything we did. We led with vision, talked about why this is helping us do what we want to do, or it's hindering us from doing what we wanted to do. And that made it a little better. But I mean, I did everything wrong, honestly. I was talking about, I mean, my very first board meeting I ever had, I told them, hey, we need to look at being multi-site, and we need to look at adding on. We need to add 12,000 square feet onto our building to facilitate kids ministry. And so I just don't know how many people, and I was just an idiot to think we should go into a meeting and start talking about a $2 or $3 million loan. And and I'd been there for less than 3 weeks. But those are the things we did that we just felt like this is what makes sense. Like, look around, like, here's some things we just have to change. Even if we don't feel God speaking to us, it's like, well, it makes sense. We have to do this differently. And so we just led the way with vision, talked through, the things that needed to change. And we're at the point now, I've been here going on 6 years, that now we're changing things that I started. So there are things now that we're changing that when we started, it was a great idea. It was really important. But we're at a point now, it's like, well, it's not useful anymore. And it's one thing to change what other people started. It's another thing to change what you started. And I realized I don't like changing the stuff I started as much. So even for that, it's a discipline of saying, hey, is this good for the body? Is this good for our team? Is this good for the kingdom of God? And if it's not, let's stop doing it. And so there's been a ton of things that we started when I came, and then we've just gotten rid of because we go, nope, it's not effective anymore. It's not helping us move the ball down the field. So we've just created a culture where we just know the only thing that is not going to change is Scripture, period. Everything else is on the table. And people just understand that now.
Yeah, that's got to be hard because those become personal. Like, oh man, that was my idea, and now we're saying it's not a good idea.
Absolutely. And so, we just have, as leaders, I just have to hold on to all those things loosely. That again, this job is not my identity. And so again, these ideas are not my identity. We're going to do this, and if it's useful, great. And if it's not, then I've got to lay down my pride enough to go, okay, well, let's move on to something else. And that is hard for leaders to do. Because we all like change if it's our change, if it's our idea. If it's not our idea, then we hate change. So yeah.
Yeah, we always love change until you change my thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of this change, growth, lots of new staff development, all that kind of stuff. But a huge priority for you guys has got to be recruiting volunteers and mobilizing them. So what are you guys doing that's working for recruiting, training, mobilizing a huge, volunteer base?
Well, let me say this: if there are people that are watching this or listening to this and they're struggling to get as many volunteers as they would like, I want you to know something. You are not alone. Every church in America struggles with getting enough volunteers, and if they say they don't, they are lying. They do. Every church in America does, and that's just the nature of what we do. So I've told our team, we're never going to have a day where we go, now we've got enough workers. There's always going to be a gap between what we need and what we have. And so we just learn to be comfortable in that. That's a tension to manage, and it's not a problem to fix. So, we do, like a lot of churches do, we have Growth Track, and that's been a great pipeline for us to get people connected. In our church, if you don't serve, you cannot be a member. So that's been effective in helping us, because if you want to have a baby dedicated, if you want to get married in our church, if you want to have a say, if you want to be able to teach, if you want to be able to be on the worship team, you have to be a member. And so those are all things that we just say, hey, you don't have to become a member, but here's what you get for being a member. Here's the benefit of us, walking together in covenant. And so that's helped. But really, we never, ever, 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 ever do cattle calls from the stage where we go, hey, we need a bunch of workers for kids ministry, sign up. Because what happens is the wrong people sign up for that. And so for us, our teams have just gotten real creative in how they invite people onto the team. And we never, it's about our language. We never say things like, hey, you wouldn't want to help come change diapers in kids ministry, would you? Because the answer is no, they would not want to help change diapers in kids ministry. But what we do is we use language of inclusiveness and community. And so we'll say things like, man, I love serving in kids. Why don't you come serve with me sometime? Come check it out sometime. Come serve alongside me. Because then we're inviting them into something. And so, we've done that, and some of our team members do it really, really well. And some of them are still struggling with that a little bit. One of the things that I think some of our team members have done really well here is they haven't shied away from high capacity leaders. So in your church, in my church, there are people that are super busy, and we naturally go, well, they've got so much going on, they don't have time to serve. That's the natural response. But the highest level leaders in our organization are the ones that recognize busy people are the people we want serving. Because what we do a lot of times is we tend to staff to the faithfulness level of someone. Hey, they're here every week. I know they'll show up. But as a result, that department, that area is lacking. It's not as good as it could be. And so some of our team, what they've done really well is they've approached, high level leaders in different businesses in our community that are part of our church and said, hey, I would love for you to be a part of this. And they'll cast vision for it, because people that have accomplished a lot, and this is going to sound terrible, they don't want to just hold a door. They want to be involved with something that matters, that's impactful. And so I've got high level leaders in our community that are involved in our church serving in different areas. And it's because our team members have said, hey, I've got this area that you could really be effective in. Why don't you come alongside us? Why don't you serve in this? And they cast vision for it. They help them see the value and the importance of it. And they lay something down to be part of something that's to them more valuable. And so it's, at the end of the day, it's a numbers game overall with volunteers. If you need 100 volunteers on a weekend, you better be asking 300. And if you're not, you're going to be lucky to get 100. And so for us, we've got, 350 volunteers regularly, and then another 150 or 200 probably that serve a couple times a year. And it's constant work, it's constant maintenance. And so our teams just know, hey, my job is not kids pastor. My job is not to minister to kids. My job is to minister to adults who minister to kids. And a major part of that is recruiting and development. That's just part of what it is. So even when we're hiring, when we bring people on, we set good expectations for what we want, what we expect to see, and that's part of it. So I don't know if there's a magic answer there, but growth track has helped. Individual communication, putting tools in our team's hands to help them invite their friends, invite people that are interested in those areas. All that stuff is helpful, but there's not a magic bullet. There's no such thing.
Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar with growth track, unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so Church of the Highlands, I think, is one of the originators of Growth Track, and all their resources are free on their website, and it's great. I mean, and they will help you. And so we've stolen a lot of stuff from Church of the Highlands. So Growth Track is 4 weeks. Ours looks a little different than what Highlands does. For us, week 1 is kind of like Summit 101. Here's our vision. Here's our values. Here's what we're about. Here's why membership matters today. Because at our church, members don't vote on anything. The only thing members ever vote on is they ratify board members once a year. And they don't even get to pick board members. I tell them, here's who I would like. You get to say yes or no, and that's it. So Summit membership is really about responsibility. It's more about, here's what's expected of me now if I'm going to step into this role. They're like our special forces. And so we talk through that in week 1. Week 2, we do spiritual gifts assessment, and we do a personality assessment, the DISC. And so we walk through that with them because we want them to understand how they're wired, how they were uniquely made, and how that fits into the kingdom. Week 3, we talk about connecting their giftings and their leadership capability and developing that overall, and what that looks like, because everyone is a leader, whether they realize that or not. So we really unpack that in week 3. And then for us, week 4 is when we connect them to all of our department leaders, pastors, everybody. So that's when we basically say, hey, here's what your spiritual gifts assessment said. Here's some things you said you're interested in. Why don't you take a look at this area? And so we'll connect them to those department leaders. And that's when they will schedule training. They'll talk about, hey, here's what the next steps are. And we'll get people plugged in right then for the most part, as far as, hey, here's what the next step is. I'd like for you to come check out a Wednesday night service, with our youth ministry 2 weeks from now. You're going to be shadowing this person, they'll answer questions, all that kind of stuff. So we set that up in week 4, and then we just, follow up. So I've got a person on staff that's her job is to make sure, people are going through the pipeline. If people get stuck, like, man, they haven't finished week 2 yet, then we will remind them, hey, week 2's coming up. We'd love for you to get involved, And so she's doing all that kind of stuff on the back end, trying to help people get connected to those opportunities and things like that. But that's basically what it is. It's just a system by which we can get people from point A to point B.
Yeah. So I know part of what you're doing with your staff is you talked about leading with books, using materials, things like that. So what's a go-to book for you, maybe that you've read, maybe with your staff or for you, or what's
Yeah.
something you gift out?
My favorite book that I've read the last couple of years is Leadership Pain by Sam Chan. That's probably my go-to, just because I've been through some challenges, and it's been helpful for me to process what that pain could be and does mean, rather than what, simply the feeling I had when I was going through that stuff. And so that's been a terribly helpful book. And I wish I would have been able to read that when I was 20. It would have been helpful for my ministry. So Leadership Pain is probably one of my favorite. Not too long ago, I read a book by Dave Ferguson, Hero Maker. Really good book, really helpful. And a book that kind of goes along with Hero Maker that I like is J.D. Greer, Gaining by Losing. And man, that has rocked my world recently, and that's been out for a while. But man, it's been so helpful for us, especially as we're looking at the book is all about being a sending culture and how to develop that. And so for us, it's so helpful as we're looking at planting churches and multi-site and casting vision for that and why we're doing that. It's been really, really helpful. So those are the 3 that have probably been the most impactful lately to me.
Yeah, every week you're involved in reading books and studying things like that. I know you got a lot of rhythms and things like that. So what does that sermon prep look like for you? I mean, every Sunday's coming soon, right? So what does that rhythm look like for you? What's preparation?
Yeah. So typically what I do is in the fall, I will sit down with any of our staff that wants to. We open it up to anyone, receptionists, secretaries, admin, literally janitors if they want to. And I'll go through all my sermon series ideas for 2020. So we're actually doing that next week. So we're going to put them all on my big board here in my office, and we're going to go through them all together. I'm going to talk about, man, I really like this one. I feel like this is what God's speaking to me. And then I'm going to have some that are like, I had this idea. What do you guys think? And so they start giving feedback, and we talk through all the things. What would we do with this? What are some takeaways, some tokens, some big ideas, some tangible things we could give them? Just illustrations on stage, clips, just different things we could do to help drive the message home. And again, it's one thing to have my perspective, but I want different perspectives on our team because they're going to see it differently. And so it's always valuable to have that buy-in. And so we'll have like 15 of us probably in the room. We'll go through all that together. We'll lay out that, next week we'll lay out, here's when we're doing this series for the entire year. So we'll lay out 2020. And if it's more of a expository series, then we're going to lay out the scripture. So if we're going through the book of Ephesians, we're going to lay out, here's the weeks we're going through this scripture, and we'll go through it all. So we'll lay out as much of that as we can next week in that one day. It'll take about 2 hours to do that. And then what I do is I start an Evernote file for each of those sermon series, and I'll put in as much information as I have on each of those files. And then throughout the year, as I'm studying for something, if I have an idea or a sermon illustration or a scripture that I read that would fit one of those sermons, I'll go into it right then on my phone or on my iPad and put it in for that week or for that sermon series. And so the closer I get, the more robust that file's getting. And so by the time I actually get to the week of, a lot of times I'm only spending 3 or 4 hours tops prepping for that week's message because I've already been prepping for it. I've already plugged in some sermon illustrations, some ideas, some thoughts, whatever it might be, books that I need to read leading up to it, those kind of things. So by the time I actually get to the week of, I'm usually only spending 3 or 4 hours prepping for that specific message. So for me, Tuesday is my sermon prep day normally, where I block off, I don't have appointments, and I just do sermon prep. And when I'm finished with that week's message, I always work ahead toward, okay, what are some things I need to work on? So we've got a big vision series in October that I'm already like it's filled out. Like I'm feeling good about it. We've got a generosity series in November that I've been working on, and so usually one day a week I'm working on messages, but usually the week of it's only 3 or 4 hours tops that I'm working on that weekend's message.
Yeah. So you mentioned Evernote. So do you have any other productivity tips, hacks, websites?
Uh,
What do you
I'm
use?
a late
Evernote's a big one for you. So what else is there?
I'm a late adopter, and which is weird for guys in my position, but some of our staff like they use Asana is the biggest one our staff uses by far. They love Asana. I just don't do it, and I kind of big time them and just say, you can assign me anything you want on Asana. I'm not getting on it. You'll have to tell me, hey, we need this done by, and I will get it done. But I'm just not going to. I'm just not going to do it. I'm pulling the pastor card on that one. But our team loves Asana. Probably half of our team, I don't know if they would know what to do if they didn't have Asana. So they use that religiously, and that's been a great tool for us. We've used Slack some in the past, and some of our staff still does use that. That's a good tool as well. But again, if not everybody's using it, it's not as valuable. But probably our go-to is Asana. For me personally, Evernote is the one that I use all the time. I use it for so many different things in so many different ways. That's probably my favorite resource that I use.
Yeah, I'm an Evernote guy as well. It's just clean, easy to use. So, um, you're leading a church, you're leading a network, you're involved as a husband, as a father. You got a lot of different roles going on, and so what does that look like for you to spend time with the Lord? When are you doing that? What does that look like? How are you staying refreshed with your relationship with the Lord?
Yeah, I'm not the guy that like will get up at 5 a.m. and pray for an hour and read my Bible for an hour and then go work out. Like that's not my routine. Usually I'm awake. Normally 6 or 6:15 every morning. And I like a little bit of a slower morning typically. So I'll lay in bed and I'll go through whatever I'm doing on the YouVersion Bible app on my phone. I'll pull up and go through, the scripture reading for the day, or if I'm doing a devotional, I'll go through that before I get out of bed. And so that's part of it. And I know this is not a popular thought, but I am not the person. I know a lot of pastors believe if you're studying for a message, it doesn't count as personal time, and I don't believe that at all because for me, I know, man, as I'm studying the word, I'm growing, it's stretching me, it's developing me. And so it's hard for me to differentiate between sermon prep and personal Bible time. And so just about anything I'm doing regarding the Bible is developing me and growing me and helping me become a better man of God. So, when it comes to the disciplines of reading your Bible and personal versus professional and that kind of stuff, to me it's not as clear cut in my life. I'm pretty conscientious about prayer and making sure I'm carving out time throughout my day for prayer. Even in just having a kind of attitude of prayer throughout the day and just making sure. It's kind of like when you're dating your wife, or if you're single, if you've got a girlfriend or a boyfriend, how your thoughts will kind of drift back to them throughout the day, and that's the kind of atmosphere I want to create with my walk with God. That, hey, every time I've got kind of a spare moment, I want my heart to drift back, and so I'll say a prayer. So I just try to spend as much time just walking with Him as I can throughout the day. So that's kind of what it looks like as far as like renewal stuff. I mean, Thursdays and Fridays now are days off for me. And so Friday's my Sabbath. I spend time with my wife. I don't do anything church related at all. My staff doesn't talk to me. They won't call me. I don't care what's happening. And I just guard that like crazy. I don't do anything on Friday related to the church. It's just family, just me personally, doing some a project or woodworking or things like that, or things that kind of renew me and kind of help me stay centered and focused on God. So I don't know if that answered your question exactly.
No, I love it. It sounds much more kind of organic and relational
It,
than like a formula.
Yeah, that just doesn't work for me to go, hey, I'm going to pray at 6 a.m. and 6 to 6:30, it's going to be this, and that's not how I function. And if I tried to do that, I would just get frustrated. And anyway, so that's not what it looks like for me.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, Mel, hey, I really appreciate your time being with us. I'm so excited about what all that's going on there at the church, and so thankful for just your investment in the Back 40 network and the conference and the podcast. So definitely go check them out. So, social media, email, what's the Back 40? What's your church? Just give us some information so people can follow up with you.
If you want more information about the Back 40 network, just visit back40network. That's our website. You can find some resources there. You can find past conference speakers, things like that. Those are available. Connect with us on Back 40 on social media, Back 40 Network. If you want more information about our church, it's the website summitpa.church. And if you are listening to this and you are on staff at a church and you would like to connect with any of our staff, our team knows we want to be a resource for the kingdom. So feel free to reach out to any of our staff. If you've got questions about things we do or how we do it, we'd love to help you any way we can. And I'm available on social media as well. If anybody wants to connect, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just Mel Masengale, you'll find me there, and love to connect with you. So Ryan, thanks so much for the opportunity to be on your podcast today and to just share with leaders. It really is an honor and a privilege, and I appreciate you thinking of me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mel, so much. So thanks, guys, for listening today, and we look forward to talking to you guys soon.